What the heck is mechanical filtration? What does it mean? And what are your options? If you've ever wondered this, please join in on this video talking and taking a deep dive into mechanical filtration. Hello everyone, I am Leslie with MA Fish Gardens, and I wanted to do a series talking about the different options and different filtration types for your tank. There's mechanical, biological, chemical filtration. In this video, I'm going to break down mechanical filtration into a little bit more bite-sized pieces and manageable in terms of being able to retain some of that information, not overwhelm you so much. So mechanical filtration is basically the way of filtering or moving water in your tank through a device that will help to remove detritus or waste that's suspended in the water column. Determining what type of filtration you use will really depend on you, what your preferences are, your tank size, what type of fish you have, and maybe even where you are in your fish keeping journey and kind of what experience you have. The options you have for mechanical filtration are sponge filters, hang-on back filters, internal filters, under gravel filters, a sump, canister filters, even maybe some filter stocks. Well, that's usually tied in with other types of filtration. There are quite a few options, and they range from simple to more complex, cheap to very expensive. And when you first start out, you tend to start with the more simple options. And then as you grow in your experience and learn different things about fish keeping and your tank, you'll typically change what you're going to use, or kind of maybe you do a combo, kind of like what I do for some of my tanks. So the type of fish that you keep is important to look at, because if you have heavy waste producers, you want to make sure you have good filtration, mechanical filtration. It's also super important to look at the amount of stock or amount of fish that you have in your tank. Once you learn kind of about these different fish, you'll learn which ones are heavy producers. But first one off the list, goldfish are dirty, dirty fish. They produce so much waste. They eat everything in sight. You have to make sure you have a really good filtration options and make sure you're adequately filtering for the size tank that you have. So depending on if you have 5 goldfish and a 40-gallon breeder versus one is going to change kind of what or how much filtration you have. So my suggestion is to, in terms of looking at filtration and what do you want to do? First, look at the size of your tank. So if you have a 1 gallon, a 5 gallon, a 40 gallon, that's going to change what you use and the size of filtration that you're going to use. Next, look at the fish. So if you have lots of tiny fish, you need to have a smaller pump, something that's slower flow. That's all going to help guide next then what you're going to put in there. So when I first started out, I would say I had every tank with a hang-on back filter with the cartridges that you throw out. Well, then I learned, and talking with other fish keepers, don't do that. Stop doing that. It's cheaper and better just to use a sponge filter. Toss that. I might use the cartridge maybe at first, and then get rid of it, and then everything, all my tanks get converted, or hang-on back filters get converted to a coarse sponge filter, which then ties in a mechanical and a biologic filtration. Now, as I have, kind of touching on changing the sponge filter, as I've gained a little bit more experience, I've tweaked kind of what I've done, what is my go-to. So then I started doing more so a hang-on back with also a sponge filter. So not getting so much of or as much filtration and flow with the sponge filter, but I'm adding aeration and getting some type of movement, providing more beneficial bacteria or space for the beneficial bacteria. So again, going in with that mechanical and some biologic filtration. Now, One philosophy that you'll hear a lot, and I am totally a supporter of, is shooting for or thinking of over filtering the tank. Now, what does this mean? So when you get certain filtration methods, like a hang on back will tell you what max gallon size it's recommended for. A sponge filter, small, medium, or large, will kind of give you a general um, gallon size you should aim for. Maybe a 1 to 10 you would do a small, a 10 to 20 you would do a medium, and then maybe you'd be doing 2 mediums, or go to a large and then a 40 gallon. Maybe you're doing a large and a 2 larges. Always think of trying to over filter, because especially with a hang on back filter, you can generally and now more so, you can dial down how much filtration it's doing or how much water it's moving. So you'd rather have the flexibility in being able to, one, if you need to upgrade your tank or change your tank, you could go to a bigger tank and still be okay with filtration. Or let's say you add more fish, you need more filtration, or then you change to like a goldfish or a puffer that are heavy waste producers, you need more filtration. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility, and then you don't have to buy a brand new filter. As we've touched on before, mechanical filtration, a lot of times you get the biologic filtration. So the media that you put in your mechanical, so like an internal, a canister, a hang-on back, you can change the media that's inside it that will be able to allow you to grow more bacteria. So to break down each one of those, we're going to start off first with sponge filters. Sponge filters are a great low maintenance, easy kind of filter option. If you don't need a lot of water movement, you have a lot of baby fish, smaller tanks, or even slower moving fish that can't have a lot of flow, and maybe not a ton of bioload or waste. I like them for all of my tanks because it just only helps to add that a place for the beneficial bacteria to grow, while helping to create some type of water flow and maybe dead areas on the other side of where my sump is. The other side of where my hang on back filter is. So the other pro that I like is it helps to oxygenate the water. So I don't need a whole lot of surface movement. That will help to add the oxygen into the water and kind of promote that gas exchange. Here is my sponge filter in action with my mono sea base. I just want to be on camera. So this is the sponge filter, and then it is connected via tubing to an air pump. When you get your sponge filter, you'll see it comes with the base. Usually the sponge is in place, and then you have to get this little piece with the uplift tube connected. When you're putting it together, you'll put this little air stone, something like this, similar, with a little piece of airline tubing, so it connects to the bottom of the space inside of the sponge filter. So it helps to kind of create these nice fine bubbles. This is what it looks like if you don't have an air stone, or in this case, mine fell off. If you have a lot of tanks in one area, you could hook one large pump up to multiple sponge filters, and you're good to go. Now, a con for them is that they're not great at generating lots of water flow. Maybe not the greatest to look at, and some people just really don't like the look of bubbles in their tank. Personally, I kind of like it, but some people just cannot stand it. So that's something to think about. Another thing that you have to think of, and I'm not sure it's really a con, but you would have to clean the detritus off of the sponge. And when you're going to get the sponge out of the water, you can knock off the detritus, so then it kind of gets into your water column. I found some tips somewhere where you can use a baggie, like a gallon-sized bag, a Ziploc bag, kind of put it under, then lift the sponge the sponge filter out of the water, clean it off, and then toss it right back in the tank. Another version, kind of like a sponge filter, there's an under gravel filter. The filter, or there's this plastic thing that's put at the bottom of your tank under your rocks. Probably wouldn't use it with sand because the sand will fall through. Basically, it's creating pressure where it's sucking the detritus down. You're able to vacuum out your gravel. Don't use it with sand. I've tried to use it with rocks. I didn't particularly like it. It was annoying to have to do maintenance, or if I needed to change anything personally, I just wanted to, it's just easier to use a sponge filter in my eyes. I did use it on a 30 and a 10 gallon, so maybe the options are a little bit, maybe on different size tanks, different type of fish should be better, not dirty fish. So it's always an option, and maybe you could do that plus pair it with something else. Hang-on back filters or internal filters, these are completely customizable, or you can change kind of what you want. How do you want it? You can use the cartridges that come with the hang-on back filter and then replace them if you want. You can use carbon, you can use like ceramic rings, bio balls, chemical filters, or chemical filtration that goes inside the internal and more so hang-on back filter. Internal filters sit inside the tank and are generating flow inside the tank. I rarely use these, and personally, I don't like that it takes up space in the aquarium. But it's always an option. I know people love them. You can get kind of dead spots in the tank, especially if you have a lot of decoration, something that's kind of blocking flow. That's something to think about. Generally, they are pretty quiet because the filter is inside the water, which is creating kind of like a buffer for the sound. Especially now, pumps nowadays, they are a lot quieter than they were just, I would even say, probably 10 years ago. So if you want more flow, maybe you wouldn't want to do an internal filter. You might want to do an hang on the back filter. Now, when you're using a hang on back filter, again, you can change the media that is inside to help promote more of that biologic filtration as well as the mechanical filtration. One thing to note with the hang-on back filter, you have to be careful when you are setting them up or restarting them, plugging them back in. You need to know if your pump needs to be primed or not. So what does that mean? Primed means it needs to have water in it. Generally, you would want it full to the top, so then that way the motor doesn't have to work so hard or run dry to run water through. I use now most of the time, and this is not a sponsored video, but I use Marineland. I know they don't need to be primed. Some of the Aqueons I know don't need to be primed, but seems like they do better. You run less of a risk that they don't start if they aren't primed. So something to think about. What will happen is, if it's not primed and it needs to prime, your motor will run dry. You have an issue, it'll burn out your motor. You can't get it to start. So just be mindful of that when you first get your pumps or get everything set up. And then also, when you're getting your hang-on back filter, it will tell you how many gallons that it would be recommended for or even rated for. I love the versatility with the hang-on backs, which is why I think that's why I typically use them, because I can change through the life of the tank what I'm putting and using in the tank. Do I need to change the pH? And I can throw some crushed coral in there. I can put some bio rings. I can do sponge filters. I can do filter floss if I need to filter a little bit more, or like I've done a aggressive cleaning and there's a lot of detritus in the water that I need to get out. So they're pretty versatile. Now, the next one to talk about are canister filters. These are an external filter that you can easily hide next to the tank, behind the tank, under the tank. Just kind of depends on what your setup is. You have to have intake and return lines to the tank, whether your tank is drilled, pre-drilled, you add drain lines, you need to have those drain lines kind of hanging off of your tank. But certainly something you can always add on later, even if you didn't at first have that type of filtration, or at first you started with a hang on back filter but wanted to change to a canister filter, you certainly could. You could even do an overflow box where the water is draining out of the tank into a little box and then will drain into the canister, go through the canister, and then go back to your tank through a return line. Canister filters don't require a whole lot of maintenance, and you can, similar to a hang-on back filter, customize what is inside. There's baskets that you can rearrange the order of everything, how much of you could just put ceramic rings in there, just sponge filters if you wanted. It's completely customizable. They are just typically expensive to start, depending on the size you get, the type you get. They can run you a little bit more on the expensive side, but and can be scary to start because you have to change kind of what you're doing in terms of the plumbing, and you can have some leaking of the different parts. So just something there's a learning curve, but once you get it started, the maintenance is relatively easy. A lot of times people will say they only do maintenance every couple months, maybe every 6 months or so. Now, the next one to talk about are sumps. So this is the filtration I've just kind of started to get into. I've always seen them. I've always been intimidated by them. Didn't really have a need to have one on my tanks. But this is also a external filter that is completely customizable. You can buy already fabricated sumps. You can do a custom order. So the company will build a sump based off of whatever you need, whatever equipment you need to put in it, or like I did, you can build your own. This is an option more so for your big tanks, monster fish, or even saltwater tanks. Basically, the idea of a sump is you're increasing your water capacity, or your water volume, increasing surface area to help increase your biologic and your mechanical filtration, and gives you a space where you can put the equipment that doesn't have to be in the tank. So you can add all your filtration, all your filter pads, your sponges, your socks, all go in the sump. Your heaters go in the sump. So things that kind of make the tank look a little bit neater. So if you have a really expensive reef tank, you don't really want to be seeing a heater, or cables for heating, things like that. With a sump, you may be able to go longer in between cleanings because you have more surface area, you have more ability or more space for filtration. So one of the couple things you need to think about if you want a sump. One, generally, this is not going to be beneficial unless you have a larger tank. You need pristine water conditions. You've got a reef tank that, the cores are super sensitive to different water parameter changes, or you've got a monster fish that you need super filtration on. So the thing with the sump is it's an external. So similar, canister has its own motor to get water back to the tank. With a sump, you have to have a filter, have to have a pump that will return the water back to the tank. Not necessarily a con, but it's another piece of equipment that you would need to have. So then you would have to figure out, how does your water get to your tank? So some tanks need to be drilled. They already have an overflow box. So it just all depends on what your tank is. You can always add, if you add an overflow box, if you wanted to add a sump. Not a deal breaker. You just have to kind of plan for that. So to wrap it all up, you have
internal and external filtration options. Internal options are things that go inside the tank, like a sponge filter, internal filter, or under gravel filter. External would include a hang-on back, canister filters, and sumps. Be on the lookout for my next video, which will walk you through the different tanks that I have with the different filtration methods I use. This might be helpful if you want to have a little bit more guidance or even idea of what you might want to use, or kind of help take the guesswork out of filtration. If you liked this video, please hit the like and subscribe button, and please leave a comment if there's anything that you would like to learn about or see next. And I can't wait to see you on the next video.